sunshiny morning. Oh no, it was raining. Well, just wait a couple hours and something will change. You're in Kentucky. It happens. Glad to see everybody out this morning. Glad to see Steve with us this morning.
Glad to be here.
Glad to see you are.
Sure.
So we'll swap war stories later. I hope everybody's had a great week. We come together today to just honor God. So let's stand, let's open up the word of prayer, and we're going to give Him honor, glory, and praise today. Father in heaven, I thank you so much for your Son. I thank you for the blessings that we have. I thank you for the grace that your Son gives us. And Father, in mercy. So today, God, as we worship you, let it be in spirit and truth. Let your Holy Spirit move among us today. And Father, let us give you honor, glory, and praise because you are worthy. We love you. We thank you for everything that you've done for us. You're an awesome God. In Jesus' name, amen. Giver of every breath I breathe, author of all eternity, giver of every perfect gift, to be the glory, maker of heaven and of earth, knowing and comprehend your word, King over all the universe, to be the glory. I'm alive because I'm alive in you. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. And it's all because of the blood of Jesus Christ that covers me and raised this dead man's life. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. Giver of every breath I breathe, author of all eternity, giver of every perfect gift, to you the glory, maker of heaven and of earth, no one can comprehend your word, King over all the universe, to you be the glory. I'm alive because I'm alive in you. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. And it's all because of the blood of Jesus Christ that covers me and raised this dead man's life. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. And I'm alive because I'm alive in you. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. And it's all because of the blood of Jesus Christ that covers me and raised this dead man's life. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. You may be seated. Blessed be your name in the land that is plentiful the Lord. Blessed be the glorious name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the glorious name. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross where the nearest that best for the world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Oh, that old rugged cross, so despised by the world, has a wondrous attraction for me. For the fear and the cloud that is glory above, to bear it to dark Calvary. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. To the old rugged cross I will ever be true. Its shame and reproach buried there. Will call
we should view the world and our place in it and our attitudes toward not only world politics, but our place in it and how we should strive to be an example and a light and not a burden and an obstacle. Father, please be with those that are on our sick list this morning. Close people to us are struggling, and we need your hand of guidance and healing placed upon us. Father, we thank you for your many blessings for us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. First of all, before Jonah takes his group, most of you know Jim White was approved unanimously. He had 0 no votes to serve as deacon. He and Curtis Marsh are going to tag team the Building and Grounds Ministry. We're going to have his ordination here at some point in the near future. But we just want to ask you to keep Jim in prayer as he begins this ministry. Very excited to see him step up and to take this role, and very excited that you all unanimously approved him. So please keep Jim in your prayers. Also, keep Neil in your prayers, because this Thursday he's going to have knee surgery. He's going to be out of commission as worship leader at least next Sunday, maybe the following Sunday, we don't know. But we've got Mackenzie Baldwin, who's been here before, to lead worship. He's going to lead worship next Sunday. And we've got somebody lined up for the following Sunday if that is needed. We'll just kind of have to play that by ear. So please keep Neil in your prayers Thursday as he goes for knee surgery. That said, Jonah. What? And Jill, yes, that was the primary person we want to pray for is Jill, who's going to have to tolerate him as he recovers. I won't be able to go see him just because of all the different restrictions, so at least they won't mistaken me for your son like they've done some other people here. So that is exciting. You won't have to go through that. So with that said, Jonah, you can take Larry and Albert and the crew and go to your class. If you want to grab a Bible, turn to the book of 1 John, and we're going to be in chapter 4 here very shortly. 1 John chapter 4. For the last 3 weeks, we have been studying the New Testament letter of 1 John, where we learn that there are many paths that a person can take to try to get to God, but there's only one path that actually gets there. That path is Jesus Christ. And so we've been learning how to travel that path of faith in Him. And so in this series, we've talked about starting on the path, how to stay on the path, about how as Christians we are traveling together on this path. And what I want to talk about today is the fact that there is someone who has actually traveled this path before. This path that we are on, there is someone who has traveled this path, and that person is Jesus. He has already blazed this trail. When He lived on this planet, He came not just to die for the sins of mankind and to conquer death, but He also came to give us an example to follow. He came to show us how to travel this path. He marked out a narrow path for us so that we could follow Him in His footsteps along the way. And I think there's many words that you could use to describe Jesus as He traveled this path for a little over 33 years. But the one that's going to jump out today, the one word that's going to jump out today is, as we read from 1 John 4, the word that's going to jump out to describe Jesus is the word love. The path that Jesus walked and the one that's marked out for us has to be marked by love. So look with me at 1 John chapter 4. We are going to read starting in verse 7 and go all the way through to verse 21. 1 John 4, starting in verse 7. John says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we love God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. We know that we live in him and he in us because he's given us of his Spirit. And we have seen and testified that the Father has sent his Son to be the Savior of the world. If anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in him and he in God. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love, John says. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in him. In this way, love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment, because in this world we are like him. There's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he is a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And he has given us this command: whoever loves God must also love his brother. Does it seem to you like we read the word love a lot in that section? 25 times in 15 verses. Do you think maybe that love is important? What is John communicating to us here? He's saying if you're going to travel this path of faith in Jesus, if you're going to follow Jesus on the path, then you're going to have to travel that path in love. And it's not like this is some kind of a new teaching. It's not like John was on some sort of a love kick and just wrote about it. He learned this from listening to Jesus teach and from watching Jesus interact with people. I mean, John heard when Jesus was asked a very important question. Somebody came to him and said, Teacher, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus responded. He said, well, the greatest commandment is that you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And he said, the second greatest commandment is a lot like that one. The second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. And John heard Jesus say that emphasis on love. John heard Jesus say, the primary way that people are going to know that you are my disciples is if you love one another. Not if you slap a Jesus fish on the bumper of your car. Not if you post something on Facebook and encourage and challenge other people to do the same. Not if you dress up on Sundays and get together with other Christians and sing songs and take communion and study the Bible. The world, Jesus said, will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. John heard Jesus say these things. He essentially lived with, traveled with, learned from, did life with Jesus for a little over 3 years on this planet. And for all the things that John heard Jesus teach about, love was one of the marquee things. Love was one of the recurring, predominant themes that Jesus taught about. But John did more than just listen to Jesus. He watched him. He saw Jesus. He watched him deal with people from all masses of people from all walks of life. And he saw that Jesus not only taught about love, but he lived it. He practiced what he preached. He saw every day that Jesus not only carried a flag of love, but he planted that flag in the hearts of all kinds of people. John saw Jesus love scoundrels like Zacchaeus. John saw Jesus heal the ear of a man who was a part of the party that had come to arrest him. John saw Jesus show love to outcasts like lepers who were shunned by the rest of that culture. John saw Jesus show love to women who had seedy reputations. John saw Jesus show love to the important and to the powerful, but also to the forgotten and to the shunned. John was there in Matthew chapter 9 He and several others have been following Jesus for some time. And Matthew chapter 9 says that Jesus is traveling through all these different towns and villages teaching the good news about God's kingdom. He's healing people. He's teaching people. People are flocking to him. And this is what we read in Matthew chapter 9, starting in verse 36. It says, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because he saw that they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. You ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. And it's interesting. This is how Matthew chapter 9 ends. Matthew chapter 10 starts with Jesus sending these guys, these disciples, out, 2 by 2, to be an extension of his ministry. And so in chapter 9, it's kind of like they're in a huddle. And in chapter 10, Jesus sends them out of the huddle. And this is kind of the point. This is really the point where these guys go from being identified as disciples to being identified as apostles. Disciple means student. Apostle means one sent. So Jesus teaches them, they're his students, his disciples, then he sends them out. And they become apostles. And Jesus encourages them to travel this path that he has been on. And he has asked the very same thing of us. If we are going to follow him on this path, then we are going to have to travel this path in love. Like Jesus, we're going to have to see people and have compassion on them. Jesus saw the crowds and he had compassion on people. He loved these people. If you look back at 1 John chapter 4, John starts the section that we read in verse 7. He says that love comes from God. In verse 8, he says that God is love. In verse 9, he says that God showed his love among us by sending his Son into the world that we might live through him. Then in verse 11, he says, since God loved us, we ought to love one another. He says in verse 16, whoever lives in God, whoever lives in love, lives in God, and God in him. So it's a pretty simple concept that John is putting forth to us. Love's source is God. It comes from him. And God's love was best established when he sent his Son into this world to be an atoning sacrifice for us. And then we, when we accept that sacrifice into our lives, we are to convey and to show that love to other people in the same way that Jesus did. That is the primary indicator. Jesus said, it's the primary indicator that lets people know that we are his followers. And so maybe a good place for us to start as we follow Jesus on this path is to simply see people the way Jesus saw people. To see them with his eyes. Jesus saw the crowds and he had compassion, loved them. And this word compassion, I did study on it this week in the original Greek language. It conveys more than just a deep sympathy for others. It's a feeling that compels you to act on behalf of others. It's not just sympathy. It's not just feeling sorry. It's empathy. It's doing something for them. It's not driving in your car in some shopping center and you see a homeless person asking for help and you feel sorry for them, but by the time you've parked your car, you've completely forgotten about it. That's not what this is. Here's what this is. It's a parent standing next to a child's hospital bed as they struggle to get a breath. That's the compassion. That's the love that Jesus feels for people. When he looks out and sees these crowds, these masses of people, it's an emotion that he feels that moves him to act on their behalf, not just to feel sorry for them. And look, Jesus' own apostles, it took them quite some time to get this. It took them quite some time to develop this kind of empathetic love. We've talked about that specifically with the Apostle John, who writes this letter. Jesus had nicknamed John and his brother James the sons of thunder, presumably because they had some bad tempers. But after investing their lives with Jesus, now John is using the word love 25 times in 15 verses. Big change. Big time change. But it took time for that to happen. And you can trace this struggle, you read through the Gospels, you can trace this struggle that the apostles had to see people the way that Jesus saw them and to have compassion on them. So, for example, in Luke chapter 9, Jesus is traveling, he's teaching and preaching, and he comes upon this Samaritan village. Now, Jewish people and Samaritan people did not like each other. That's putting it politely. But the people in this Samaritan village, as Jesus and his disciples approach it, they refuse to welcome Jesus and his apostles. And James and John are ticked off in particular. And they turn to Jesus and say, "Why don't you let us call down fire from heaven and burn all these people up?" Now you know why they were called the sons of thunder, right? That sounds like the reasonable thing to do. Let's burn this village down because they're not hospitable. In Matthew chapter 14, there's this great crowd that's gathered to hear Jesus teach. It's getting late into the day, and the people are getting restless. They're getting hungry. They're getting angry. And the disciples are like, "Jesus, just send these people off. Let them go find some food." And Jesus says, "No, let's take care of them. Let us give them something to eat." In the very next chapter, Matthew chapter 15, there's this Canaanite woman that cries out to Jesus, and she says, "Lord, have mercy on me. My daughter is suffering." And she keeps crying out, and Jesus doesn't respond to her at first. And the disciples beg Jesus, and they say, "Would you send her away? She's bothering us with all of this begging. Just tell her to move along. It's kind of getting annoying." And it's as if Jesus was waiting for them to say something, so that he could teach them and show them about love. So he stops. He gives his attention to this woman. He talks to her, and he heals her. In Matthew chapter 19, you keep reading. People are bringing their little children to Jesus so that he would put his hands on them and bless them. And the disciples are like, "Look, parents, this is not a good time. Y'all, he's busy right now. Just go over to Chuck E. Cheese, come back later. You need to take the kids and just do something else with them." And Jesus admonishes his disciples and he says, "No, you let the little children come to me." And to follow Jesus on this path, we need to say, "Jesus, would you let me see people the way you do? Would you give me your eyes when I look at people? Help me to see people. Help me to treat people. Help me to have compassion on them. Help me to love them just like you." I'm just going to tell you, that's not an easy thing to pray. It's not an easy thing to pray when you cannot stand your coworkers. It's not an easy thing to pray when you don't care for your classmates, or your neighbors annoy you, or a friend who's like a vampire that sucks the life out of you because they're always needing something, or the truly needy person that needs the time and the money and the energy that you can provide. I mean, we can't say to God, "God, I want to follow your son on this path, but could you just take these needy people out of my life for a little bit?" That's a devastating attitude for us to have toward people that Jesus loved and laid down his life for. There's a really dramatic example of this. Story of a photojournalist by the name of Kevin Carter. Kevin Carter took famous pictures that showed the human suffering in sub-Saharan Africa a number of years ago, back in the 1990s. And there's one particular picture that Kevin Carter took that is especially disturbing. Some of you have probably seen it before. It's a hard picture to look at. But it shows this young Sudanese girl. And she is weak, and she is alone, and she is trying to crawl to an AIDS station for food. And there is a vulture behind her waiting for her to die, so that he can eat. The story goes that Kevin Carter waited 20 minutes for the vulture to spread its wings because he thought the picture would be better, but that didn't happen. And so he just took this picture as it is. It's reported that after he took the picture, he scared the vulture away, but he left the little girl because something else caught his eye. Eventually, when this picture was published, it was very moving, understandably, and people began to ask the question, what about the little girl in the picture? What happened to the little girl in the picture? Kevin Carter didn't know. And he got a lot of hatred for that. I tried to explain it. And he said, you just don't understand what it's like there. You're surrounded by this all the time. You're just surrounded, and it's everywhere. What am I supposed to do? He won a Pulitzer Prize for this picture in 1993. And then he went home and killed himself. 33 years old. Now we hear a story like that, we see a picture like this, we shake our heads in disgust. But you know, he's just one person. You're just one person looking at it, knowing that that kind of thing still happens. I'm just one person looking at that, knowing that this kind of thing still happens. Millions of other people who saw this and were disgusted and spewed hatred toward Kevin Carter, they were just one person when they saw this, and they know that this kind of thing still happens. Are we any less culpable? Especially those of us who claim to be following Jesus on this path. How can he love us, and yet we turn a blind eye sometimes to others? Look again at what John says in verses 19 through 21. He says, we love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And he's given us this command, whoever loves God must also love his brother. So look, it is not about you and I having a choice in the matter about whether or not we're going to love while we follow Jesus on this path. There is no option for us to travel without love. It's impossible for us to follow Jesus in faith without also expressing and showing love repeatedly to other people. You cannot be a follower of Jesus and not love people. That is not an option that has been presented to us. There is this book that came out years ago. I first discovered it back when I was in college. It came out in 1978. It's a book called The 100. And it's written by an astrophysicist by the name of Michael Hart. And in that book, The 100, what he did is he ranked the 100 most influential people in world history. And I was curious about how he would rank these things. So I remember thumbing through this at a bookstore in Maysville that's now closed. But more importantly than the list, I wanted to see why we rank people where we rank people. Because number one on this list of most influential people was Muhammad. And number two was Isaac Newton. And number three was Jesus. And in explaining his rationale, he said that he put Muhammad first because of the sheer number of followers that he has in Islam. And the fact that he said they're willing to lay down their lives for the things that Muhammad taught. He said Isaac Newton was second because his discoveries in science made years ago are still, it's what put modern technology, what helped put modern technology, some of the stuff that we enjoy today, came about originally from some of Isaac Newton's discoveries. And he said he put Jesus third. And he said, I would have put Jesus first simply because of the unique teaching he had about loving your enemy. No one else in the whole world has ever put that idea out there. But he said, I chose not to put him first. And I want you to look at his explanation for this. He says, these ideas about loving your enemies, which were not part of the Judaism of Jesus' day, nor any other religion, are surely among the most remarkable and original ethical ideas ever presented. If they were widely followed, I would have no hesitation in placing Jesus first in this book. But the truth is, they are not widely followed. In fact, they are not even generally accepted. Most Christians consider the injunction to love your enemy as at most an ideal which might be realized in some perfect world, but one which is not a reasonable guide to conduct in the actual world we live in. We do not normally practice it. We don't expect others to practice it. We don't teach our children to practice it. Jesus' most distinctive teaching, therefore, remains an intriguing but basically untried suggestion. Now, I read that and I was ticked off. I was ticked off, first of all, because I'm really competitive, and because I'm a Christian, I wanted Jesus to be first. And I still think Jesus should be first. But here's another reason why I was ticked off. This ticked me off because I think he's right. This ticked me off because I think he's spot on. I'm not sure that those of us who travel this path do the best at loving like the one who originally traveled. I'm just personal opinion. I'm not sure followers of Jesus have handled the outcome of the 2020 presidential election in a loving way. I'm not sure all of our posts and comments on social media, not sure we can categorize those as loving. I'm not sure the cold shoulder we give to somebody who has cut us deep. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I know that that's not love. I know that when somebody cuts me off in traffic, sometimes the words that come out of my mouth are not loving words. I know my reaction that I have sometimes. When someone calls this church or they stop by this church and they're seeking financial assistance and they are a repeat customer, I know my response to them sometimes is not always loving. The sarcastic comment that I can deliver to somebody that I disagree with, it's not Christ. Maybe Jesus should be third. Maybe Jesus should be third. Because of how I respond to the lifestyle of love that He both taught me. Now look, loving people does not mean that Jesus condoned or endorsed everything that they did. Just the opposite of that. When people did not accept Jesus' truth, He did not retaliate. He did not smart off. He didn't stomp around and fight back and drag them through the mud. He didn't call down fire from heaven like James and John wanted him to. In fact, the Luke 9 story, when James and John wanted to call down fire on that Samaritan village that refused to welcome Jesus, you know what Jesus did there? He turned to James and John and He harshly rebuked them. You know what He did at the Samaritan village? Nothing. Nothing. He left. He went to another village, Scripture says. Jesus didn't take that moment and use it as a launching pad to hate Samaritan people, like most of the Jewish people of His day did. In fact, the chapter right after Luke chapter 9, when that happens in Luke 10, Jesus tells one of His most memorable stories of all time, and the hero of the story is a Samaritan who helps a mugging victim. The two villains in the story are the two religious people, the priest and the Levite, who see the same man and walk the other way. In John 4, Jesus stopped and talked at length with a Samaritan woman who had a very questionable reputation. So Jesus did not let that one experience with a Samaritan village permanently taint His experience and His treatment of other Samaritans. He just kept loving the people, even when most of His contemporaries loathed them. Jesus traveled this path that we are on, and He did it with love all the time. And if we're going to follow Him on this path, we have to do the same thing. It is not an option not to do it. Now, as we wrap this up, we go a different direction. How many of you are aware of this show, or have you seen this television show on the Food Network called Chopped? Raise your hand if you have ever seen or heard of this show called Chopped. Some of you have. I've never seen a single episode of Chopped until this week, when I heard this particular story. Quick rundown if you've never seen or heard of the show. You got 4 contestants on each episode. They're all professional chefs. They come onto the show and they go through a series of cooking challenges. They're given a mystery basket for ingredients. And in the basket, there are one or two ingredients that are really good, stable, solid ingredients. And then you've got one or two ingredients that are just lousy ingredients that you wouldn't want to cook with, like gummy worms or cheese whiz or, pickled pig's feet or something like that. It's things that you never want to cook with, right? I mean, gummy worms are good, but you don't want to cook them with cheese whiz. Okay? So it's a challenging mix of ingredients that each of the 4 contestants are given, and then they have to come up with something to cook. They have to cook, and after each round, one of the 4 contestants is chopped, or they are eliminated from the game. And there was this recent episode where there was one of the contestants was a young man by the name of Lance. And Lance was a Christian. And the reason you know Lance is a Christian is because Lance talked about being a Christian. He talked about it repeatedly. He talked about being a Christian. He talked a lot about his faith. And I'm just going to be honest with you, in those situations, I have a cringe sensitivity that kind of goes up in situations like that, because you never know how these people who profess to be Christians are going to act. You don't know how they're going to represent. It's a cooking show, Lance, right? You got to calm down a little bit. There's this other chef, one of the other 4 contestants on the show, a young lady, probably in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, but she had had a hard life. Her grandmother raised her, but her grandmother is sick, and she is basically on her deathbed, and she lives in Paris, the grandmother does. And the grandmother just doesn't have much time for her. And the young lady had said at the beginning of the episode that if she won the $10,000 prize, she was going to go back to Paris and spend her grandmother's final days with her. She hadn't seen her in quite some time. And so it ends up, by the last round, it's these 2 contestants. It's Lance, the guy who says he's a Christian, and this young lady. And when you watch the episode, if you're like me, and maybe you're not, if you're like me, it's like, Lance, I'm glad you're a Christian, but sorry, I'm pulling for her. I want her to win this and go to be able to see her grandmother. Lance ends up winning. And when he wins, when the judges announce that he has won by a razor-thin margin, the female contestant kind of hangs her head, and she walks off, and the camera follows her. But as she's walking off, you hear Lance's voice from off-camera say, "Hey, wait." Unscripted moment. Awkward tension with the judges. She turns, and Lance says, "Come back here." And he says to her, "Look, I didn't plan on winning this money. I didn't think that I would win it. I want you to have it. Go see your grandma." And the judges, they show each of the judges' faces. They are collectively stunned. The young lady is stunned to the point that she just begins bawling, tears streaming down her face. She gives Lance the biggest hug in the world, and the episode ends with him saying to her, "We are both winners." And I'm like, okay, Lance is a Christian. All right, now you can say it, Lance, you're a Christian. Totally changed how I felt about the guy. What totally changed how I felt about the guy? The moment he backed up what he said with love. The moment when he practiced what he preached. The moment when he had compassion on that woman, just like his Savior. Listen, we have the opportunity and the opportunity and the opportunity to say, "Hey, wait." And people who think they know about Jesus, people who think they know about the church, will see the gospel in a whole new light. They will see Jesus when we follow him on this path in love. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for another day that we can come together just to worship you. Father, we thank you for the love that your Son has repeatedly shown us, not just in his death and resurrection, which is incredible, but Father, the love that he had for all walks of life. And Father, that's very challenging for me. It's very challenging for a lot of us to be the love representatives in this world that we're called to be. Loving people does not require that we sacrifice our convictions, or that we no longer stand on truth. Your word says we're to speak the truth, but to do that in love. You're to do everything in love. The word also says if we claim to be a follower of yours, but we don't have love, we're like a resounding gong, plain singing. Father, help us to realize love's importance, the importance that it had to Jesus to love you and to love people. And I pray that we would, as we follow him on this path, follow him in love. We thank you for your Son and for all he's done for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Would you stand and sing the song of invitation?
I wandered far away from God. Now I'm coming home. The paths of sin too long I've trod. Lord, I'm coming home. Coming home, coming home, never more to roam. Open wide my arms of love, Lord, I'm coming home. My soul is sick, my heart is sore. Now I'm coming home. My strength renewed, my hope restored. Lord, I'm coming home. Coming home, coming home, never more to roam. Open wide my arms of love, Lord, I'm coming home. I know that's my soul. His blood's covered in sin. I believe. My shame's fading away. My pain is healing His name. I believe. I believe. My Lord, conquered the grave. I'm a king of it. 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 birthday.
So how long?